over to Mr. Umesh Revankar, Managing Director and CEO, Shriram Transport Finance Limited. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, friends, and good evening to those who joined from western part of the world. A warm welcome to all of you who joined this call. I hope all of you are healthy and safe. Joining with me today, Mr. Parag Sharma, CFO, Sundar, Accounts Head and Executive Director, Sanjay, who is our IR Head. Let me first start with the economic and industry update. The government started Unlock 5.0 in October 2020, with the lockdown being only in containment zone. A high recovery rate of 96%, and India's good fortune of avoiding second wave of COVID-19 meant that economic recovery continued. The government continued its calibrated approach towards relief and stimulus measures to help the Indian economy back on the growth phase. Some of the measures that really help the industry are: the income tax relief was provided to real estate developers and home buyers in the form of widening the difference between circle rate and actual sale rate. 6,000 crores was infused in infrastructure debt platform. On agriculture, 65,000 crores of fertilizer subsidy was announced to the farmers for forthcoming crop season. 1,43,000 crore were sanctioned to the farmers through Kisan Credit Card. 25,000 crores was disbursed for providing capital funding for farming through NABARD. 3,621 crores was sanctioned to 11 states as interest-free loan towards capital expenditure. In addition to that, 3 lakh crore existing emergency credit line guarantee scheme, which was announced earlier, was extended till March 31st. The government also approved a PLI scheme, the Performance Linked Incentive Scheme, at the cost of 1.46 lakh crore to boost economy, and some of the major industries that involved are pharma, medicine, electronics, and mobile. Then PM Awas Yojana for help building 12 lakh houses by spending 18,000 crores. So these were the measures by the government, and RBI also adopted a very constructive approach in its announcement and policies. RBI released a draft discussion paper on revised regulatory framework for NBFCs. However, the same is not expected to materially impact STFC, as we are already well above the minimum compliance measure with the proposed quantitative norms, including capital adequacy ratio, standard asset provisioning, and NPA classification. In manufacturing, the industrial output remained volatile, with the index of industrial production showing 4% rise in October due to festival demand, -2 in November due to increase in virus in certain states. However, manufacturers are speeding up production, as witnessed by the PMI index reading in November being 56.4, indicating future expansion. The GST collection was robust, which is sustained above 1 lakh crore, and recorded 10%, 1.4%, 12% increase over October, November, December, respectively. The acreage under Rabi crop was higher by 1.6% at 651.9 lakh hectares on year-on-year basis. That is on the bumper crop we received last year. The reservoir level stood at 68% of their full capacity against 56% of the capacity in the previous year, indicating indicating that the agri would perform much better than previous year. Now coming to the auto industry, the commercial vehicle sales recovered to pre-COVID levels. Almost it is equivalent to the previous year at 193,043 units against 195,211 units in the previous year. The intermediate commercial vehicle and tippers witnessed bigger demand. In fact, the heavy vehicle witnessed increase Q on Q by 26%, and mostly the demand was for tippers. And LCV is showing growth, including the ICVs. All our branches are operational now, and now I come to the our quarter performance. We clocked a disbursement of 12,606 crores, including 332 crores of new vehicle and 12,198 of used vehicle, which, as I indicated, it was on par with last year's quarter. The AUM was 1,14,932 crores as on December, compared to 1,08,931 crores previous December 2019. The net interest income was 2,148 crores in Q3 against 2,114 in Q3 20. The net interest margin was 6.88%, which is 20 basis points higher than previous quarter, as against 7.34 in the previous year Q3. The profit after tax was 727.72 crores compared to 879.16 crores in Q3 20. EPS stood at 29.54 against 37.76 in the previous year. Collection was consistently good in the last quarter, recording 97% in October, November, and 104% in the month of December. The stage 3 NPA stood at 7.11 as compared to 8.71 in the previous year. Overall credit cost now for the quarter was 2.15, and for as on 31st December it's 2.59. Since all the macro indicators remain constant, we expect that we are well within our overall guidance of 2.7 to 2.8 range given in the beginning of the year. Our liquidity position stands at 13,429 crores as compared to 10,891 crores as on October 28, 2020. I hope you have received the investor update. Now I request Parag to give highlight on the liability side.
The overall fundraise has been good. For the quarter, we raised close to around 12,000 crores through various instruments. This is compared to the previous quarter, we raised close to around 10,000 crores, or 2,000 crores more. And in January, we have also accessed the overseas market and completed a successful dollar bond for $500 million. Dollar bond received a good response from investors, the order book being more than 1 billion. So that will add to further liquidity. As mentioned, the liquidity is around 13,000 crore, which is covering easily the next 6 months liabilities. Coming to the liability profile as such, we have been focusing upon retail deposit, which has grown year on year from 13% to 14.76% now. and securitization is marginally down from 24% to 23.7%. Bank term loans constitute around 16%. Capital market instruments domestic is around 21%. Overseas bond constitute close to around 13% of our liability as of December, and loans, overseas loan is close to around 4.2%. This is broadly the breakup of liabilities. Total liability is being 26,000 crores. Interest cost has come down marginally by around 20 basis points in December quarter, given that the bank borrowing rates have been much lower. On the ALM side, cumulative surplus up to 1 year is around 8,500 odd crores, 8,696 to be precise, and all buckets, the shorter buckets are also positive. I think you are aware that we did a rights issue in August for 1,500 crores. With that, the debt equity stands at around 4.7%, as it was running at around 5.2. With the rights issue, it came down to 4.7, and we're confident this will maintain at around 4.7 level for this year. There have been some positive rating actions by both domestic and international rating agencies. India Ratings have made from negative outlook to stable outlook. S&P and Fitch, which has a negative watch, have now removed that negative watch, and it has become negative outlook. We are still engaged with rating agencies to ensure that the negative watch is also reversed. But I think rating agencies did mention about seeing performance for 1 or 2 quarters. So we will be in constant touch with rating agencies to ensure that the rating is restored to the earlier levels. I'll hand over to Sundar now for accounts update.
Good morning. The employees count as on December was 24,670. It was down from 25,893 in September 2020. We have recently started the process of adding new employees, and hence the employee count should go up in the next couple of quarters. The cost to income ratio remains stable at 22%. It was 21.83% in September 2020. Primarily, the increase in the expenses was on account of CSR expenses, which was not done in the previous 2 quarters. That had contributed to the increase in the overhead expenses. And during the quarter, the company had credited the accounts of eligible borrowers an amount of 231 crores towards ex gratia, as notified by the Government of India. The same is expected to be reimbursed by the Government of India through State Bank of India, and hence we don't expect any impact on the P&L of the company. As regards the nil collection cases that we had discussed in the previous call, there were around 1 lakh customers having an exposure of 1,200 crores who had not paid even a single installment during the moratorium period. Subsequently, most of them have started paying, and as on date, there are still 9,600 borrowers who have not paid even a single installment since March 1st, 2020, and the exposure to these cases is 112 crores, which has been classified as stage 3, and appropriate provisions have been held. And as far as the ECLGS is concerned, we had extended it to 77,000 borrowers amounting to 694 crores, and we also had given the option of one-time restructuring as per the RBI notification. We received a total proposal close to 3,000 crores, out of which we have invoked 2,267 crores worth of proposals as on 31st December 2020, which was the last date, and out of which we have already restructured 310 crores, which comprises of 11,570 borrowers, and the required provisioning as per the Reserve Bank of India guidelines has been maintained on these loans. When we come to the asset quality, as mentioned by Mr. Revankar in the earlier, the stage 3 was at 7.11% gross stage 3, and the net stage 3 was 4.31%, as against 7.26 gross in September 2020, and net stage 3 of 4.51% in the same quarter. But however, as per the Supreme Court direction, we have not considered cases which were not an NPA as on 31st August. Had we considered those cases, this would have been the level. But following the Supreme Court order, our gross NPA was 5.33 and 3.22. However, in our books of accounts, in our financials, we have provided for all those cases, even though we are not required to provide. So we have been conservative in that count. The coverage ratio as on 31st December 2020 was 41.20%, as against the coverage of 39.71% in the previous quarter. The stage 1 as on December was 80.78%, as against 81.58% in the previous quarter, and stage 2 assets were 12.11%, as against 11.15% in the previous quarter. We have maintained an coverage ratio of 3.23% on the stage 1 assets and 9.99% on the stage 2 assets. And the probability of default for stage 1 was 7.4%, and for stage 2 was 23.12%, and loss given default was 43.08% as on December 31st. We have continued to make a COVID-related provisioning in this current quarter also, which amounted to 225 crores, and the cumulative provision which we are holding as on 31st December was 2,507 crores. The company has also followed the RBI guidelines as regards the provisioning of assets, wherein it required that the company needs to maintain a minimum of IRAC, Income Recognition, Asset Classification and Provisioning Norms of RBI, which was 6,164 crores as on December 31st. As against that, we are holding, as per the Ind AS, 7,746 crores, meaning we are holding an excess provision of 1,582 crores over and above the RBI requirement. And the capital adequacy continued to be good, Tier 1 being 20.51%. So that's it from me. So,
over to Q&A.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin the question-answer session. Anyone who wishes to ask a question may press star and 1 on their touchtone telephone. If you wish to remove yourself from the question queue, you may press star and 2. Participants are requested to use handset while asking a question. Ladies and gentlemen, we will wait for a moment while the question queue assembles. The first question is from the line of Abhiram Iyer from Deutsche Bank. Please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, congrats on the results. I had a sort of a bookkeeping question on the cash flow. So if I look at the reduction in cash, that's somewhere around 8 billion cash and investments. And if I look at the increase in debt, that's around 3.5 billion. So a total of, say, 11.5 billion. The operating profit is somewhere around 16.5 billion with another 2.5 billion of taxes. So give or take 14 billion of cash coming in from operations, which is roughly 25 billion in cash incoming, whereas the change in loans is around only of on-balance sheet loans is only around 18.5 billion. Now I understand you have paid dividends of around 1.5 billion, so that still leaves sort of a hole of around 5 billion INR in terms of cash charges. So could you just let us know if there are any sort of non-cash components in the income statement or non-cash charges that have non-cash inclusions that have been made?
There are no non-cash charges that have been made in the financials. So what I would suggest is that we'll take this question offline and provide the reconciliation to you through Sanjay Mundra. Got it.
Let me follow up on that. The other question that I had was the fall in securitization and of assignment loans. So is this something that the company is sort of strategizing? Can you just give out a reason for this? Because it seems the fall seems kind of steep for this quarter.
In fact, RBI permits even the normal loans to be classified for priority sector classification in the bank's book. That is the reason why banks are happy to give loans rather than doing securitization. Having said that, some of the banks, foreign banks and some of the private sector banks do continue to do securitization only. So there has been, last quarter we did 3,500 crores of securitization, and this quarter we have done 2,700. So there has not been there has been dip, not substantial dip. I agree that we used to do around 5,000 crores of securitization prior to March. But I think the classification only is the only reason why there is a shift from regular loans rather than doing securitization.
Got it. Thank you. I'll get back in the queue. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Nishant Shah from Macquarie. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, sir. Congrats on the numbers. So I just had a couple of questions. First around how do we think about outgiving defaults in the current environment? So stage 2 provisions that you hold are roughly around 41%. For the accounts that are going to be defaulting this time, the envisage there will be either an upside or a downside to the actual crystallized losses that we see once we repossess the vehicle or however else we resolve it. How do you think about those aspects in the current environment? So that's the first question.
See, this ECL model takes into account all these factors. So it is primarily the historical data that we look at, and also the current economic scenario, and basis that we come out with that LGD of 43%, 42, 43%, and hence there may be cases wherein there will be 100% write-off, there will be cases wherein there will be a 10% write-off required. So combination of all these things put together will be 41, and hence we are not unduly concerned whether it will be overshooting the coverage.
Okay. Got it. And second, just a small data keeping question. You mentioned stage 1 and stage 2 assets in the opening remarks. I missed it. Could you just repeat that, please?
Yeah. Stage 1 assets was 80.78%, as against 81.58 in the September quarter.
Correct.
And the stage 2 was 12.11%, as against 11.15 in September quarter.
Correct. And these are the numbers which are ignoring the Supreme Court judgment.
Correct. Ignoring the Supreme Court judgment.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Shubhranshu Mishra from Systematic Shares. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. My first question is with regards to the employee count, which has been falling for over a year now. However, if I look at the employee expenses, it hasn't fallen commensurately. So how do I read into those numbers, sir? If you can explain me that. That's the first question.
The employee count has come down year on year, and there has been a visible decline in the employee cost in the first couple of quarters. In fact, in April, there was a substantial reduction. Then, as the business started picking up, we started compensating those employees who are currently working with us. And now couple of months back, I would say that we started the process of again starting recruiting new employees, and the numbers will reflect maybe in the March quarter or June quarter. So we expect the employee count to come back to the pre-COVID levels by 2022 March. And yeah. So any other thing you wanted to clarify?
No, here the employee.
My only thought here is that we've had a substantial change in the employee count by roughly around 3,500 employees, and don't see a similar commensurate change in the employee expenses. So what am I missing here?
See, the fresh recruitment we are doing through apprentice scheme, so they do not come as employee immediately. So we have actually have another 600 people as apprentice, and going forward, because there are state to state various minimum wages act, there are changes in minimum wages act. So till we get harmonized, we felt that it is better to absorb people under apprentice. So therefore, the numbers, it is not reflected, but actually we are adding. In the last 3 months, we have been adding, and we'll be adding more people going forward.
Sure, sir. And my second question is with respect to the restructuring, sir. What amount have we provisioned for, and is this and we have only accounted for roughly around 3 billion. So how do we look at the rest of the restructuring going forward, sir?
We have restructured 310 crores worth of assets as on 31st December. And
Right.
on that, we are holding the provision of 10%. So 30 crores provision is being held. And we are also involved, apart from this 300 crores, 1,900 crores worth of assets, which is likely to be restricted in the March quarter or maximum June quarter. So having said that, we also believe that the quantum of restructuring will be much lower than what has been invoked, because normalcy is coming back in certain sectors, and hence the borrowers may not actually opt for restructuring in the next couple of months also. It's possible.
Sure, sir. And sir, why are we not dialing down the liquidity, given the fact that there's so much of liquidity around? We are still sitting on roughly around 10-12% of the balance sheet. So why are we being so conservative? Is it for the bondholders? Is it for the rating agencies? What are we doing this for?
No, I think it's a conscious decision. We thought we'll continue with higher liquidity till maybe next 3 quarters, and then take a call. So this has been consciously done.
Sure, sir. And my last question is with respect to your collection team, sir. If you can give me the strength of the team and what is the cost that has been budgeted for the collection team in FY21, as well as any ballpark number for FY22, so for the collections.
That I would suggest that you contact Mr. Sanjay Mudra, who will be able to assist you. And coming back to your first question, that there is no significant dip in the employee cost. See, if you see the 9 months employee cost, it's 739 crores in the previous year. The current year it is 658 crores. So there has been a dip of around 10%.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Those were my questions.
Okay.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Umang Shah from HSBC Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Good morning. Congratulations on a good quarter, and thanks for taking my question. Sir, I have 3 questions. The first one, how should we look at the credit cost getting into FY22? We are maintaining substantially good coverage on stage 3 assets and even at about 4% on stage 1 and 2, which is higher than what we typically maintain. So how should we look at credit costs getting into FY22?
Credit cost should slowly go back to our long-term average of 2%. This year, we had given a guidance of around 2.7 to 2.8 in the beginning of the year. So we are well within that as of now, and we are confident of managing it within or much, maybe lower than that by the year end. But going forward next year, since the economy is likely to do very well, and the opportunity for the growth will be there, and also the revenue earning capability of our customers will be much better. So we expect it to go back to our long-term average of 2%.
Okay, that's great. So my second question is on disbursements, and clearly this quarter disbursements have picked up pretty well, and we are kind of tracking a little ahead of what we had guided in the previous quarter. So how should we look at growth? Would you like to upgrade your full year growth guidance for FY21? And a related question that, as you already mentioned in the previous point, that growth outlook is only getting better. Would we like to look at raising equity capital for the residual portion of the approval which we had taken?
As far as the growth is concerned, we in the beginning of the year, due to COVID, we said there will be flat growth. Now we expect growth of between 5 to around 6% AUM over the previous year. Next year it should be a double-digit growth because opportunities are much better. And if we feel that this increased growth requires a growth capital, then definitely we'll come to the market. But it all depends whether it requires growth capital or current capital position is more than sufficient. So we'll take the call maybe in a couple of months, depending upon what kind of growth we can expect. If it is whether just a double-digit growth or it is more than 15-20% growth, that is something which will be clear by maybe in a couple of months.
Okay, great. And sir, last question is on, just wanted to get your views. Do you really believe that there could be any impact of the proposed green tax that the government is looking to impose, given the fact that the most marginal player in the ecosystem gets impacted the most because of this? Do you really think that will have any meaningful impact on our business?
There is no official announcement as of now. But only one official announcement that is there is government is going to scrap its own vehicle, central government, more than 15 years old vehicle. They are going to scrap in March 22, not this year, next year. So other proposal or other unofficial statements are more than 15 years old vehicle. When they go for fitness certificate, they may ask for additional levy of tax. But there is also one more line which has appeared in some newspaper saying that more than 8 years old vehicle, they may ask for the green tax of approximately 10 to 20% of the existing tax. That means it works out to around 2,000 rupees to 4,000 rupees per annum. So it is not going to make any big difference because the per annum around 2,000 rupees per vehicle, depending upon the size and capacity of the vehicle, I think it will vary. So I think it is not going to make a big difference for the owner. If it is because having an asset, by buying a younger asset, if it is costing much more capital to him, he better pay additional 2,000 rupees or 3,000 rupees and retain the existing vehicle. So we do not know the economics of it unless we have a very clear government guidelines. Then only we can calculate the economics. But I don't really think it will deter customer to hold on to older vehicle unless there is some incentive for him to change into newer vehicle.
Understood. Great. Those were my questions. Thank you so much, and wish you good luck for future quarters. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Vivek Ramakrishnan from DSP Mutual Fund. Please go ahead.
Sir, good morning and congrats on the dollar bond issuance, a very successful one. My questions are around the customer behavior. What is the freight capacity utilization? Are the freight rates going up because fuel charges have been going up? Have they been able to pass it on? And the number of customers who are on, who are actually started flying the vehicles, it was low previous quarters. Do you have a sense of how much it is? That's the first question. The second question is, during the downtime, people put a lot of effort on collection efficiency. How are you looking at balancing growth versus concentrating on collection efficiency at this point of time? Since I think you don't have a separate team for both. Those are my two questions, sir.
So basically, there is no idling of the vehicle now. I don't see any kind of idling, neither from the individual operator or large operator. Earlier, what we observed was the single operators were able to run their vehicle because they are the owner operator. They are not dependent on the drivers. But even in the large fleet operators today, all the drivers are back. So we are not seeing any idling of the vehicle. Vehicles are engaged. As far as the fuel price is concerned, the freight rates also have gone up. That means they are able to pass it on to the end consumer, and therefore the freight rate increase, fuel price increase did not had a negative impact on the operators as of now. So I think they are able to manage. They are able to pass it on to the end customers, and only thing is there will be inflation because of that. So we are seeing food inflation only because of the fuel price increase. So how that part of it is going to be addressed over the period by the government and RBI, that we need to see.
Well, also on the collections and sorry, one more related question was, we're talking about second-hand trucks. And when you repossess, is there demand for second-hand trucks now, given the optimism that you're seeing on the ground?
See, the demand for second-hand trucks are very good. In fact, the LCVs are selling at around 20% premium than what it was in the previous year. Only heavy vehicle, the resale prices have not gone up, but it has not come down also. In few pockets, there will be some differences, but generally, overall, when I look at, there is not much of a difference in the resale prices. What happens is, a used vehicle gets used for multi-purpose application. Unless only the new vehicle, when the people buy, they buy it for specific application. But the moment it becomes a second-hand, then it gets used for everything, whether it is sand, cement, grains, for everything it gets used. So in India, most of the vehicles are not specific vehicles, they are all open vehicles. So the application, the usage of the used vehicles are general application. So it gets used everywhere. So we don't really see a big challenge. So collections are quite good, and our people are able to meet customers as frequently as it was in the pre-COVID level. So there is absolutely no laxity from our side or from the customer side. So we are back to the business as is usual.
Excellent, sir. Thank you very much, and good luck to the team.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Riken Shah from Credit Suisse. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity and good set of results. I had two questions. The first one was on the stage 3 ratios, where even in the absolute terms, it is down almost 15% year on year, and even in terms of the stage 3 ratio, it is down almost 160 bips versus a year ago. The collection efficiency is also higher than our normalized run rate. A part of that can, of course, be attributed to lack of collections during moratorium, but now it's above that. So just trying to understand, it does seem like, the COVID never happened for us, and how should we think why our customers and why were we able to deliver superior asset quality performance here? Thank you.
See, what I am trying to say, what I'm trying to convey is that most of our customers are owner-operator. So being owner-operator, the advantage is the ability to earn and operate the vehicle is his own wishes. He is not dependent on any driver or other external factors. And the demand for transportation actually went up. See, when the supply of new vehicle comes down, automatically then existing vehicle gets used almost fully. And last couple of years, the new vehicle addition to the Indian fleet has come down substantially. So utility and usage of the used vehicles have gone up. And small operators are having advantage because of having no overhead cost on them. They're not employing anyone. They're themselves are operating. That was an additional advantage. Plus, if you look at the rural and semi-urban, what you said is right. You can go to any of the semi-urban rural area, you feel as if there is no COVID. Only in the urban city, the people are operating from home. The executives who have an option of working from home, they have been working from home. But in the smaller towns and in the villages, there is no such option. They have to go out and they have been working. So you will never see a COVID-related impact in any part of semi-urban rural area. So 90% of our business being in that particular area, we are quite comfortable. And the customer also is comfortable.
Okay, that's helpful, sir. And just to follow up on that, earlier you did allude that the capacity utilization overall has gone up, but would you be able to share a number for the industry as a whole, where the capacity utilization rate is now, and maybe how it compared versus pre-COVID?
See, pre-COVID to now, I may not have because this is a very unorganized sector. I will not be able to give you the exact numbers on how the utilization levels are there, but I can only tell you number of days vehicle run, because we track on with the customer how many days his vehicles are running. So pre-COVID level, because the economy was slowing down, it was around 21 to 21 days on an average vehicle running. Today, the vehicle running is between 22 to 24 days. So to that extent, we can say that there is increased utilization of the vehicles. But beyond that, we may not be able to substantiate with industry numbers.
No, I think this is very helpful in itself, sir. Thanks again for answering the questions.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Kashyap Javeri from MK Investment. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and congratulations for really great numbers in testing times. I have just one question, which is on your external commercial bonds and borrowings, which is about 17% of the total. If you could throw some light on how they have been hedged, and do we carry any risk if there are any significant adverse movements in the currency?
Yeah, the policy.
What I understand is that we do full hedge at the beginning itself, but if you could explain that bit in detail.
Yeah, as you rightly mentioned, we as a policy hedge all overseas borrowing, both principal and interest, for the full duration. So there will be no unhedged position and there will be no risk. So the overall cost for overseas borrowing is known upfront, and there will be no additional cost. So supposing we do now what we have done is around 4.4% level, a dollar bond. On completely hedged basis, whatever be the cost, around 9.2, whatever it comes out to be, will be known upfront, and there will be no other cost in spite of whichever way the rupee dollar moves.
And intermittent quarter, any charge to the P&L because of the movement in INR will be all notional, and through the life of the bond, it will be zero.
Yeah, see, we follow the hedge accounting,
right?
And so whatever is the intermittent fluctuations in the currency is taken below the line, and it does not impact the quarterly profit.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you, sir.
Hi. Thank you. The next question is from the line of Shweta Daptardar from Prabhudas Lilladher. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir, for the opportunity, and congratulations for good set of numbers. So I was looking at the borrowing profile. So while the interest rates have turned benign, even the securitization has dipped quarter on quarter, year on year. Why aren't we taking the benefits of lowered rates and tapping the term loan side of the borrowing profile? Is there some inertia from the banks? Are they expecting more? Because since a year, the mix has remained steady state at 16%.
Well, in fact, that has been the focus. So term loans have gone up. Even if you look at this quarter, the term loan was the quantum raised through term loan was the highest compared to any other instrument. So that would be the focus. There have been the maturities of the earlier loans. We were not able to access much during the moratorium period till August, September. Maybe the borrowing was slightly lower. It was more to do with the schemes which were announced. The banks were more comfortable to provide liquidity through those instruments, be it direct assignment, be it TLTRO, so that loans per se was slightly lower in the earlier quarter. And for the maturities, the percentage didn't move, but now it is picking up. In fact, the loans will be the focus area, and that continues. I think it is at around 16% now. We do expect this to go up to 20% in next 2-3 quarters.
Sure, sir. So my second question is, so you alluded to the fact that operator profitability has not impacted much, that there has been COVID impact pretty negligible on the rural side, and now the collections which are showing 104% of the demand. So the underlying understanding is that so people, as in the borrowers, opted for moratorium, but now they are suddenly fine and they are okay. So our collections have gone up, and even on the billing date, the collection efficiency is as healthy as what we are reporting as a percentage of demand. Can you just throw more light on this?
No, basically what happens is our customers every month they do not pay the full EMI, and sometimes they pay 90%, sometimes they pay 104% or 105%. And December is the month every year. It is not only this year. Every year it is a harvesting time, and there will be more cash in the rural in the month of December because they get the cash against their crop. So generally December collections are good. So it is every year same repetition. I don't see it as exceptional. And the only thing what we can say is, as far as the rural and semi-urban is concerned, it is a pre-COVID situation or the no impact situation. So that's what we can say. But as far as urban is concerned, there are some challenges where things are not as smooth as it was in the past. So maybe urban transportation is still not normal. The school transportation is still not 100% normal. There is some normalcy, but not 100% normal. So I think this what I can tell you is the COVID has had a very little impact in the semi-urban rural area, and only during the lockdown there was some restriction. But now, since there is no lockdown, the business is back to the normal.
Sure, sir. So last question from my side. So do you have anything to elaborate and throw light upon the RBI discussion paper? So I heard you on the media mentioning that you might even opt for banking license and that the merger talks are on the back burner. So would you like to elaborate on this and as against the contours of the RBI discussion paper? Thank you.
No, we are still discussing on the same. We have not really come to any kind of a conclusion on the same. But as far as the banking is concerned, we are very clear on few things. Being NBFC, you have certain advantage. You can run a company with lean management and minimum expenditure. But if it is a bank, then you have multiple functions and your costs goes up. And also you have additional disadvantage of having a CRR and SLR. That is, and for a large balance sheet, converting into bank, there are some challenges. So these are the few things which we have been debating and discussing internally, and we also expressed this very clearly to the regulator. So as of now, there is not much of change in our stand.
Sure, sir. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Amit Kantra from HDFC Mutual Fund. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Just one question from my end. See, your disbursement growth is around 11% year on year, right? Can I know that what is the new customer acquisition that you must have done this quarter versus what you did pre-COVID, just to see the growth there?
See, new customer acquisition is a continuous process. So we keep now. If you look at number of branches, we have added 85 branches, 85 additional branches compared to that of previous year. So the new branches gives us a new destination, new reach. So ultimately, it is the reach that is very important in this kind of business, because most of our lending is by meeting the customer, knowing the customer, and we don't we don't really take the customer or onboard the customer on digital platform. So it is more of a physical work. So it is the reach only is creating opportunity for us to service more number of customers and more number of geographies. So we feel that that is a continuous thing.
No, my question was more from the perspective that out of these disbursements, how much of it would be to existing customer base and how much would be to new loans altogether?
See, new existing customer keep coming back to us is one part of it. New customer acquiring is additional. That's what I'm telling you. New branches are giving us new customers.
We don't have the numbers offhand, so you can contact Mr. Mundra. He will be able to help you out.
Okay. Thanks. No, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Piran Engineer from Motilal Oswal AMC. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Congrats on the quarter. Actually, I had the same question as Amit as to, what percentage of our used vehicle disbursements are for purchase of vehicles and what percentage are top-up.
Okay. So, there is nothing called a top-up here. Only when customer completes his previous loan, he gets fresh loan. So that also after re-inspection of vehicle, and depending upon the LTV, we give loan. So we don't give a top-up on existing loan. That's one thing. And as far as buying selling is concerned, we are the probably largest company. Whenever there is a buying and selling happens, Shriram is the first on anybody's mind, because we are the largest lending company for anyone who buys. So typically you can say around 60% of our loan is to our existing customers, but that need not be on same asset. Our existing customer will keep buying new asset. They'll keep selling some existing asset. They keep buying new asset. They also keep adding more asset. So around 30 to 35% of the customers will be totally new to the Shriram, but they would be introduced by existing customer. So we insist that any new customer walks in, they need to be introduced by existing customer. So we network and get the new customer inside our fold.
Okay, that's good. And the second question, did you mention you raised 12,000 crores of debt in the quarter?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the incremental cost of this debt? So the 550 million will be at 9.2, 9.3, but the domestic debt that you raised is at what cost?
Varies between 8.5% to 9%.
8.5 to 9. Okay. That's all from my end. Thank you and all the best.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Akash Datani from HDFC Securities. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, and thank you for taking my question. So I have just one question. I'm not sure if I missed this earlier. What percentage of your customers have not paid a single EMI, say, since June end?
June. Okay, you can give the March number.
Can you just repeat the question?
No customer not paid any installment.
Yeah. So as on date, the number of customers are 9,600 who have not paid a single installment from March 2020 to current date, and the exposure amount is 112 crores.
112 crores. Okay. That's it from my end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Abhishek Murarka from IIFL Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good morning and congratulations for the quarter. So just a few quick questions. One, this restructuring of 2,200 odd crores, specifically any particular segment that this has been given to? And last quarter you had sort of indicated that overall restructuring could be around 2.5 to 3.5% of AUM. So is it likely that another 1.5% gets restructured going forward?
No, see, totally we indicated it can be up to 3%. But when we started working on that, we came down to the amount of 2,200 crores.
Okay.
2,200 crores, which is around 2% of the portfolio. But again, there we have completed only 300 crores till now. And rest of the customers, they have an option of restructuring before March 31st. So it was specifically directed towards passenger segment, especially school transportation and the office transportation. That is the office transportation and two aggregator vehicles, Ola Uber vehicles, where the income had dropped. But as of now, the aggregator model, the Ola Uber, they have bounced back to some extent. Nearly 60 to 70% of them have started repaying, and they say we don't need restructuring. So we did direct towards this segment, but the response as of now has been little slow because some industries have revived. The tourism industry has fully revived almost. Most of the tourist place in India, there's no rooms available, and to the extent there is fully occupied and activities are in full swing. And even city mobility has improved. So we will just wait and see whether others they come forward for restructuring or whether the number of restructuring would be much lesser than what we anticipate.
So the maximum amount that can be done is 2,267, not beyond that, because the deadline was 31st December, which is already over.
Okay, perfect. And the follow-up on that is basically you had also indicated that about 1% of your AUM were customers who have not paid a single EMI. Now, suffice to say that most of them have been recognized in your pro forma GNPA and therefore nothing else remains. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah, see, as we mentioned earlier, out of the 1 lakh customers who had not paid during the moratorium period, still there are 9,600 customers who are still not paid. The rest of the customers have started paying, and they have been classified in the appropriate stages. And these 9,600 cases have been classified under stage 3, and 40% provision has been taken.
Okay. Sorry if I missed that. And the next question is repossessed vehicles. Could you share the value number this quarter and last quarter? Just what is the value and volume of repossessed vehicles?
You can take this number from Sanjay offline. We'll provide it.
Perfect. And just lastly on this additional provision, so now you're carrying quite a bit of provisions. Your commentary is positive, and you're talking about largely having done the restructuring, etc. So on an incremental basis, would provisions normalize from the next quarter, from 4Q?
As things stand, as on 31st December, we are adequately provided, but we need to take quarter on quarter. So more or less, we are coming to the end of the COVID provisioning, I would say.
And any understanding on when you'll start utilizing this, or will you carry this as a contingent buffer?
Still, that discussion is still on, so we'll come back to you on that. We are not decided as such.
Right. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Aditya Jain from Citigroup. Please go ahead.
Hi, sir. One question on the stage 2 loans. The number today is much below the pre-COVID level. I think it used to be around 20%. So how will this do you expect a normalization in that, and how will that shape out? So in terms of maintaining the overall provisions, would that lead to a lower probability of default in stage 1 loans, or we will have a temporary increase in provisions to account for increase in stage 2 loans?
Stage 2, couple of years back, if you go back, it used to be around 12% to 14% level. It had shot up to 20 odd levels 1 year back, and December 2019 onwards itself, it has started coming down because more focus was given on these stage 2 assets. And this 10 to 12% is the normal, I would say, going forward. And the requirement of PD and LGD, it is a continuous process. Every year we revisit the numbers and then add one further year and then remove the earlier 5th year. So that will be continuous process. So even if there's an decrease over a period of time, that will happen gradually. It will not abruptly happen.
Well, thank you. And on the Shriram Group, just merger talks, if you could just tell what is the thinking on that right now?
There is no further talk on the same. It is in the back burner now.
So back burner as in, I mean, is it paused for now, or is it thinking that it will not be done?
No, that we cannot tell now, because we feel that right now the focus should be on the performance, strengthening the companies. So we are not really looking into it immediately.
Right. Thank you, sir. And there's the last thing. If you could quantify how much was the CSR part, sorry if I missed this, and the 231 crore amount which is transferred and the government will reimburse, how does it play in the P&L, if at all?
This 231 crores has been created to customers whose account are still live, and some customers who have already settled with us and closed the contract, we have transferred to their respective bank accounts. And this 231 is supposed to be paid back by the Government of India through State Bank of India, and we already lodged a claim before the deadline, and they have started asking certain further additional details, and we expect that it should be credited to our account maybe by March 31st, before that.
Thank you. And the CSR amount?
CSR amount was 37 crores in the current quarter.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Radhika Lohia from Mirae Asset. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good morning. So just one data question from my end. So you had given me number of probability of default for stage 2. Could you please repeat that?
23. The probability of default of stage 2 was 23.12%, as against 23.12% in the current quarter, and the previous quarter was 23.19%.
Okay, and for stage 1 is 7.4%, right?
0.4 as against 7.48 in the previous quarter.
Sorry?
It was 7.4% in the current quarter as against 7.48 in the previous quarter.
Okay, thank you so much. That's it from my end.
Thank you. The next question is from the line of Ashwin Kumar Balasubramaniam from HSBC Asset Management. Please go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to know what is the trend you're seeing in terms of resale values of the vehicles. And secondly, we've seen a fairly significant improvement, if you look in terms of proportion on your M&HCV side. So just wanted to understand what's kind of driving that, because I mean, if it's used vehicles, what is driving that? Because the new vehicle is still seem a little bit muted on the M&HCV side versus the LCV side. So if you can give some color on that. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as LCVs are concerned, the resale prices are up by 20%. It is, you can straightaway link it to the increase in price because of BS6. The BS vehicles are priced 20% more in LCVs. Therefore, the used vehicle resale price have gone up by around 15 to 20%. In some categories, even up to 25%. As far as the heavy vehicle is concerned, the resale prices have not really gone up significantly, mainly because the new economic activities are not really robust, and there was an excess capacity in the system because 15% additional axle weight was allowed to be carried in the heavy vehicles. So there was excess capacity being built, and therefore the resale prices on the heavy have remained same as what it was in the previous year. But we expect the situation to improve, mainly because some of the main application of the heavy vehicles are your movement of cement, steel, and some your what you call commodities like the mining products. So these activities have not resumed to the fullest level. So once these resume, especially we expect the government spend on infrastructure will go up substantially post-budget, because government has outlaid 111 lakh crores to be spent in 5 years, and 1 year is already over because the plan was the outlay was announced in the month of April last year, but because of COVID, most of these are postponed. So we expect post-budget the government will push on infrastructure, and that will create a demand for all bulk transport materials, and therefore the heavy vehicle demand will come back, and definitely the used vehicle price also will bounce back. So as far as the used heavy vehicle is concerned, typically used heavy vehicles are used for a multi-purpose, because in India most of the vehicles are open vehicles and it can be used for anything, including whether it is a poultry, whether it is a vegetable, whether it is a grain, whether it is a sand or there is cement, anything. So used vehicle get application which is universal. But when we buy a new heavy vehicle, it normally gets used for specific application in the first 3 to 5 years. So the used vehicle demand and movement and the earning have been reasonably good. So that much I can say.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was the last question for today. I would now like to hand the conference over to Mr. Umesh Revankar for closing comments. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you for attending today's call. It was a reasonably good quarter for us, and we are quite confident this fourth quarter also will turn out to be a good quarter. The collection trend seems to be reasonably good, on par with the previous quarter. And we feel that growth will come back in the coming year, next year, especially as I was just telling you that government is likely to spend a reasonably large sum on the infrastructure and that should lead us for better growth and a better utilization level, and we should continue to perform as good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On behalf of Shriram Transport Finance, that concludes this conference. Thank you all for joining. You may now disconnect your lines.